Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to Rome 2 Total War Strategy Saturday. It's been a while since I've done this, but frankly I've been busy, so I've been playing a lot of other things that have been coming out. Yeah, a new expansion came out, so I just wanted to go through that. Let's go click in the Grand Campaign to look at them. This was another faction expansion. It was the Balkan tribes. So what we've got here this time are groups who are very good at sort of raiding. They sort of hire quick mercenary forces and then disband them very quickly as well. So their bonuses are promise of loot. They get 50%, minus 50% mercenary recruitment costs, which makes them very, very inexpensive to recruit mercenaries. But they have got rapid campaigns, plus 50% mercenary upkeep costs, which means that these guys very good at grabbing a huge number of mercenaries and then fighting a battle, getting them all killed, and then just disbanding whatever mercenaries manage to survive the battle. So these guys are one of those sorts of forces, a little bit like Carthage in that regard. Now, anyway, going first, we've got the RDA. Not sure if I'm pronouncing any of these right, but that's sort of how I think it's pronounced, RDAA. It's got pirates plus 200% income from raiding. That's a huge amount, but it's not really my playstyle, so I can't really comment too much on it. They've got neglected land, minus 20% wealth from agricultural buildings, which for my particular playstyle, that really stings. And then they've got expert seafarers, plus 1 recruitment slots in all ports, which I don't think is really all that necessary or relevant. So basically, these guys are, if you want to play as pirates, I mean, they get a huge income bonus from raiding land and sea, as far as I can tell. So it doesn't have to be by sea, but these guys are a naval race. So moving on, Getay. We've got fiercely independent, plus 10% melee defense in battle. Our gods, public order, bonus of maximum of plus 4 from presence of Balkan culture. So these guys are a new cultural group as well, so that's something to consider. And old enemies, minus 25 to diplomacy with all nomadic factions. So these guys are a little bit more standard. They're a little bit more like one of the Gaelic tribes. And next we got the Adrician kingdoms. Raiders plus 100% income from raiding, which is half what the RDA get, but the Hellenic enmity isn't all that serious, minus 20 to diplomacy with all Hellenic factions, and deadly aim, plus 2 experience ranks from missile recruits. So the deadly aim makes these guys really, really good at just accumulating cheap spam missiles early on in the game and wrecking face with them just with a few blocking units. Just so long as you can keep them protected and sort of have something to finish off the enemy like your general. Next up, you've got Tylis, live by the sword, plus 1 experience for infantry recruits, plus 150% income from raiding, but they've got minus 4 public opinion from presence of Balkan culture, so they're kind of more direct. They still have to do raiding. All these guys have to do raiding. I'm not particularly used to that in my particular playstyle. I don't do it very often. I'm much more used to using my armies for conquest as opposed to that sort of thing. So it makes more sense to me to take over a place than to stand around raiding it. But that's just me. If you do like raiding places, slowly wearing them down economically while you grow your army and then suddenly crush them with a huge mercenary force that you've been sitting around waiting to accumulate for like 5 turns, these guys are very good at that. So let's go look at their armies list in this thing here. So we got the RDA, we'll start with them. The only general that they have are the Illyrian Noble Hoplites. Extremely good armor, 105. They've got decent melee defense as well, but their offensive characteristics are, as usual, pretty much lacking. They're not really great for that, but they're not terribly expensive for an inspiring elite unit, so they're a pretty okay general unit. They'll live. They're likely to do okay, and they're not too expensive. They're expensive, but they're not, like, debilitatingly expensive. Next, we got Mercenary Axe Warriors, Illyrian Raiders. The only non-axe unit they've got are these mercenary Celtic warriors who are kind of pants, but their axemen are actually quite a bit more decent than a lot of other ones are. The armor 55 on these mercenary axe warriors is 55 at a decent value and 50 melee defense, which means these guys can actually survive in a protracted combat. And with a weapon damage of 32 with base 16 and armor piercing 16, these guys are not actually that bad at chopping through heavier infantry. And they've also got the bonus versus infantry and a decent, respectable melee attack. So these guys are actually quite good for their cost. Personally, I'm not sure that I really like them as a direct front force. I don't think that they would necessarily win against heavier classed infantry. The only thing that I think they can do is that they would do a lot better than other axe warriors and maybe win against medium infantry if the medium infantry doesn't severely outnumber them and isn't higher quality. Spear infantry we can look at. These guys are sort of their most numerous things here. These guys like range from really quite lousy to the Illyrian Spearmen all the way up to more Illyrian Noble Hoplites. The interesting one are the regular Illyrian Hoplites with the armor value of 95 and with expert charge defense. These guys are actually really solid. They're really hard to kill. Their health is not necessarily the most fantastic in the world, but that's pretty much fine ultimately. I mean, a lot of units have 50, but their melee defense, their armor combined makes them really good. They've of course got that bonus versus large. Their weapon damage and melee attack for their cost is not bad either. So they're a pretty all-around good unit. I like them a lot more than Mercenary Hoplites, and it kind of makes me wonder why the hell the Mercenary Hoplites kind of even exist here. I mean, the combination of expert charge defense and those higher stats is really good. I suppose that if you really want disciplined, you could get the Mercenary Hoplites, but I don't find it actually helps that much. The formation admittedly of square compared to Hoplite Wall is inferior, but like I don't use those too often, so. The major deficiency with the RDA that makes it so that I don't think that they're really all that competitive is they really lack cavalry. Their missile units are sort of meh. You can use slave slingers and you can sort of get by. But the fact that they've only got Illyrian cavalry, who are a light cavalry unit that are exceptionally weak, really puts them behind in their ability to wage that sort of war that you would want to. But what they can try to do is really sort of use the Illyrian hoplites and then go in around the side of the Mercenary Axe Warriors, where the Mercenary Axe Warriors will absolutely do terrible things to enemy units, especially if they get a really good flanker rear charge. But other than that, they haven't really got anything that stands out as being overly fantastic. The Illyrian Raiders also, I should point out, have stealth. I haven't really ever used that, because I don't think that it's necessarily a good idea to have fragile units like that ahead of the army without some sort of protection from spears. If you're up against a faction that doesn't really have good cavalry or very much cavalry, Illyrian Raiders absolutely does make sense, and that fact that they're, I think, a little bit superior in certain senses to the Mercenary Axe Warriors makes it so that they're a viable choice as well. But all in all, I would say the Mercenary Axe Warriors are a little bit better just because they've got that bear defense, so they can actually win fights. Even though the Illyrian Raiders do have better abilities with Use the Whip. But moving on from there, yeah, the Illyrian Cavalry makes it so that they just can't win certain types of fights all that efficiently because they need to hold people in place with the Illyrian Hoplites and then go around the flanks with these Mercenary Axe Warriors. But to prevent the Mercenary Axe Warriors from getting cavalry to death, you also need to cover them with spears because your cavalry can't do it. So what you end up with is this weird situation where you just have this sort of ever-widening line of spears and axes and stuff like that until it sort of gets a bit unwieldy and unlikely that you're going to be able to properly do what you want to do with it, or your enemy's going to be able to fend off one of the flanks, or they're just going to send elephants through it. So I think that they're sort of good, but then they lack that one crucial element, which would have been some sort of shot cavalry to fend off enemy cavalry, which would have made them excellent. So next up, let's go look at the Getay. So these guys have more choices of generals, and I don't like their spear general as much as I like the last one. The noble spears are a little bit wishy-washier, and they're a little bit more expensive. I don't think that they're quite as competent, but that is because they have also got more choice. The noble horsemen are pretty decent. They're a tough, all-around good unit. They've got trample. They're okay at counter cavalry sort of charging, that sort of thing. Makes them sort of reliable and okay at their job, but their armor is kind of catastrophically low for their type of category. Next up, they've got noble swords. I think that noble swords are what you're going to end up taking if you're playing as the Getay. I think that they've got sort of the best compromise between defense, offense, and staying power all around, so I think that they're going to be what most people end up taking unless they're up against someone like Parthia, in which case it might make more sense to take noble spears. For their melee infantry, they've actually got really strange variety. They've got Falxmen. They're the first unit army to have these guys. The Falxmen are people who are basically using halberds. They've got a sword attached to a lengthened shaft. Some people compare it to a great sword or a double-handed sword. I don't really think of them that way. I think of them more as a pole arm, personally, but it gives you more leverage to swing is what they were designed for, and they hit really, really hard. As you can see from this guy, 46 weapon damage, which is really quite good. They've got a decent bonus versus infantry, and these guys are like the Naginata Samurai if you played Shogun 2. Which is to say they sort of hit really hard on the charge, but then they're kind of weaker after that. And you can sort of really see that from their melee defense of 1. Sort of in between, they've got the Mercenary Axemen, who, again, actually surprisingly competent. for these particular guys, but not necessarily the greatest. And then they've got the noble swords, and the noble swords, obviously, they've gotten courage, they've got the high stats, and they've got the high melee defense. I don't think that, obviously, you'd want much of these guys in your line. They don't even have necessarily that great damage, because only 4 of it's armor piercing, but they're pretty survivable, and they're pretty tough, and they can really do a lot to wreck lesser quality troops. I do think that what you're going to want to do, though, is just stick to, like, one noble sword or whatever. Now, for their spear units, they've got another bevy of sort of units going along here. They've got the light ones who are just sort of there to cover your backs and flanks against light cavalry attacks that are trying to slip through. They've got the heavy spears, which are admittedly okay. The bonus versus large being plus 25 is kind of nice for all of these, but they've also got the armored spears. They've got a lot less bonus versus large, but their overall statistics are much higher, and then they've got the noble spears. Now, none of these guys are anywhere near as good as the Illyrian spearmen, but it's made up for by the army at large, and you can see the Getay also have a decent selection of missile units, strangely no slingers. But then they've also got the noble horsemen as shock cavalry and the spear horsemen. Both of them are pretty decent. Neither of them are fantastic or anything, but it's nice to have that sort of mid-tier and the high tier, and to have that variety between them. And they've also got bow horsemen, which I think is really quite strange, but it's quite nice that they've got that as another option. It really sort of expands the options of play that they can really pull out of their hat. Alright, so next up we've got the Odrysian Kingdoms. Now the Odrysian Kingdoms are all about the Falxmen. The general can be Thracian Royal Cavalry, who are melee cavalry. They're heavy cavalry, they're okay. I think that they do a decent job, but they're again not necessarily my favorite. That's not really what they're supposed to be about, but they've also got the Thracian Nobles, who have a whopping 76 melee attack and a weapon damage of 51. That's just crazy, that's ridiculous. They've got a bonus versus infantry of 15, they've got a charge bonus of 63. So if these guys basically charge in on you with frenzy, you're going to die. Like, they're going to kill absolutely everything. But the problem is, of course, they've got melee defense of 4, so whatever they don't kill is going to kill all of them back, and that's how they sort of work. Not sort of where you want your generals to be sitting, but the alternative is not really much better necessarily. Their armor is 80 and they've got 90 health, so it is a little bit more survivable, and it is what you'll typically see me recommend these sort of guys stick their general in, because it is also quite important for these sort of groups to keep their general alive. But anyway, moving on, they've got the mercenary Falxmen, the Thracian warriors, and the Thracian nobles. Now, the Thracian warriors are an excellent unit for their cost. They've got a lot of hitting power, just absolutely ridiculous amount, but they do die very quickly. So what they would ideally be used for is a sort of flanking force. Since you don't really have a very good holding unit, you've got the spear infantry, the mercenary hoplites, who are good, but they're not amazing or anything. With their 65 armor, 50 health, these guys are not the best hoplites out there. The Thracian warriors end up being sort of your frontline troop, and the thing is, you can sort of send these guys in human wave attacks. You can sort of send in like some mercenary Falxmen, 5 abroad or something, and charge them right into the enemy infantry, and they'll all get slaughtered, but they'll probably cause a lot of casualties on the way in. And then you can do another line of Thracian warriors backed by your Thracian nobles, or led by your Thracian nobles or something, and they're probably going to smash through whatever's left, if they're mostly... God damn it. Oh my god, this is a bad day for interruptions. But anyway, yeah, so they don't have any sort of outstanding units other than the ones I already sort of talked about. The Falxmen are really sort of the core of this army, and they've got sort of a limited roster otherwise to sort of really force you to emphasize that sort of unique unit of theirs. So let's move on to the Tylis before I get interrupted more. So these guys are the most sort of bog standard of the lot of them, sort of Celtic style army, or at least I feel they have a very Celtic style army. They've got Noble Horse and Oathsworn as their generals. Obviously I think that the Oathsworn are a little bit more reliable and steady, but they're a little bit overpriced now in my opinion. It's hard to say really. They have got Thracian warriors, which means that they have got a melee unit that's got that really good punch, and they've got the middle tier one. They haven't got any of those crazy weird axemen. They've got some decent swordsmen. The Galo-Thracian infantry, it's pretty decent, solid all around. Nothing fantastic or anything. Tribal warriors, these guys are actually quite weird. Their melee attack is so low that I'm not sure what I really think of that. Like, they have got a decent bonus versus infantry, but I think that in a certain way almost this is one of those rare chances to take infantry that emphasizes attack a little bit more that I think is worth it. So I think that the Galo-Thracian infantry is just a little bit better. It's hard to say though. Like the defensive properties of these guys is just good enough that I think that if you want to sort of use these guys to hold up the enemy, there are your go-to choice in this case, the tribal warriors, because their spear units are sort of mediocre. These guys are definitely ones that you only want to be using to chop up cavalry with. They're nothing really that's going to do a good job against infantry. Levy Freemen, especially Celtic tribesmen, are really bad even against cavalry. I don't really know what the point of those guys is. But spear warriors, even the spear warriors, are not necessarily the greatest defensive-wise. So if you really wanted to use these guys to pin an enemy in place, you'd want to use tribal warriors. I don't necessarily think that's the playstyle you would want to be playing with the Tylis. I think that they would want to be a little bit more sort of swarmy and aggressive, but I don't think that there's anywhere that I view them as being really highly competent. Their melee cavalry is pretty standard. They've got noble horse and they've got light horse, which means that they can sort of fight infantry, but they can't do counter cavalry all that effectively. And then they've got raiding horsemen, they've got mercenary Thracian cavalry, both of these being, of course, javelin cavalry. They're the same cost for some reason, and their stats are not different enough that I can really differentiate or really care. But, I mean, yeah, I'm not really sure I care about the distinction here. Of course, frenzied charge on a ranged unit is just like weird, but whatever. So yeah, that's all of the barbarian factions, or sort of the new Balkan factions. Not barbarian, well, the Greeks probably thought of them as barbarians, but yeah, they're definitely unique enough that they're someone that you would want to know about if you're up against them, especially the Odrysian kingdoms, who have those sort of ridiculously high value falxmen, but don't necessarily have a lot to back up, so it lets you sort of know what they're thinking of if they're taking the Odrysian kingdom. It makes them really sort of telegraphed. I think the Getay are the most well-balanced and well-rounded of the lot, which makes them a little bit more dangerous overall, but I don't think any of these guys are really sort of high-level threats necessarily. Anyway, I'm going to go jump into a game now and see what happens. Okay, and welcome to the battlefield. As you can see, I'm playing as the Getay. Not been having a very good track record with any of these sort of factions. I don't think they're the most powerful. They definitely have some interesting units and flaws, but yeah, I don't really have much appreciation for their particular style, because they're not very good at the combined arms thing, but I think that these guys, the Getay, are probably the best along with Tylis, perhaps. But yeah, let's give this a go. As you can see, we've got a pretty decent amount of bowmen since we are against the Carthaginians, which do have the option, of course, as always, to just spam the ever-loving shit out of pikes. And it does look like he's taken quite a lot of pikemen, which has made his army quite small. He's got mercenary Cretan archers, so despite the fact that I've got a lot more archers than him, including my cav archers, he will win that. He is using Aspis companion cavalry, so if I can get a unit of hoplites, or armored spears rather, near him, I will very easily beat them in that particular fight. I think that one of us is either disconnected or something. Interesting. Okay, we're going to switch these guys over to heavy shot. Okay, I don't want to necessarily go too far forward here. And the thing is, in this particular case, like, I can't attack him from the front, but I have not necessarily got really that kind of frontal assault kind of army anyway, so it's possible for me to win this sort of by playing it fairly conservatively. The real concern are these Cretan archers, which are quite excellent, so doing something to kill them is going to be necessary. Okay, I want to get these guys close enough that I start shooting at them, and I want to also immobilize these guys, so yes, they're noticing I'm backing off, so I'm going to go back in. Okay. And I want to keep these guys just sort of in range of my guys. And these guys I'll give a different hotkey to as well. And if I can get these guys sort of in range of his troops so I can get some shots off at them, that would be fantastic while they're running those archers around. Okay, so he might be using his guys a little bit more aggressively. I don't know if I've even shot these Activist companions at all, but him moving those guys around that way is fine by me, since it gives me an opportunity to sort of move in with my archers. Okay, and it looks like he's moved in too close as well, so this gives me an opportunity. Oops, I need to run these guys away. Don't know how many of those arrows are going to be able to land on my archers. I think that most of them are going to fall short. Whoops. Okay. Now, if he doesn't decisively win this sort of skirmishing engagement, then I'm going to be able to win this pretty easily, pretty much hands down. I really need to get one of my Syrians over here. Yeah, this is definitely not decisive. Like, he is beating my archers quite badly, but considering how much more he poured into them, he's taken quite a few losses, so this is not the worst.
Our men flee the field.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually charge in here with these guys. I'm going to start moving in with these guys as well. Since his guys look a little bit out of position to me, I think I could sort of manage it. Okay, so what are these guys? Thorax swordsmen? I can take those. So one of my units managed to get drawn out of position pretty badly, but okay, I don't want to engage frontally, obviously, against those pikes, so I'm going to move these guys around this way. And these guys are getting shredded up pretty badly. And even 2v1, those noble horse are not necessarily going to do all that well against me. Okay, so I don't want to chase too hard there. And that's going to be his general down as well, so this is going pretty well for me, in all honesty.
The enemy general is dead.
And let's charge in here as well, so you can see he's starting to form a bit of a pike box, which is pretty expected given the circumstances. But you're going to be able to get some shots off against him, I think. Okay, so he is definitely trying to take out my archers back here, but that's fine. Just gonna retreat away here. You can see him boxing up completely. Speaking of shameful displays. Okay, and we're freezing up yet again. Fantastic. Okay, this I think might have gotten around enough on those Thorax Swordsmen's flank, so I can charge them. And I need to get units close enough to capitalize if he sort of breaks formation so that he can sort of fight those units on the sides there. He might just be willing to lose those Thorax Swordsmen. Okay, so these noble horse are also probably going to die, but you know what, that's fine. Yeah, we're going to retreat with these guys. We don't want them running into the pikes. Okay, and these pikes are in trouble. These pikes are also in trouble. Lovely. Okay, sure, whatever. This would not be the first time I've encountered a pike box, so as you can see, that one unit though is really getting pounded, and I think he's mostly shooting at my pikes, or my
one of our units has used all its ammunition.
Don't even know what those are anymore. Okay, so let's charge these guys in there.
Our men flee the field of battle.
Lost another
This
unit,
is a shameful display.
but there's a gap here that we can take advantage of. Okay. I don't want to be wasting arrows against these Aspis companion cavalry, but is going to have to be the case for a certain amount. God damn it. Okay, well, whatever. It's a telemarker, I can tell, just because they've been calling all freaking day. I'm just gonna literally not care about it.
Flee the field of battle. This is a shameful display.
Okay, so how are these guys doing? Pikemen down to 41. Okay, what we're gonna try and do is just charge into these guys. And what this should do is actually
Our men flee the
might be able
field
to
of battle.
overwhelm them there.
This is a shameful display.
These guys are now caught. As I thought, that pike wall section is weak, so I'm able to sort of take advantage of that. Okay, and those pikemen are starting to be a bit worried.
Move out! Our general is under attack.
Okay, good. Okay. We're able to get in on these pikemen to a certain degree. Those guys have chain routed.
The battle is turning in our favor.
And that is that. Yes, they've really weakened the pike box's efficiency and effectiveness, so that doesn't work really all that well anymore. Lost a ton of archers, but that's okay. So, yeah, that was that. The axe warriors, as you can see, are actually quite good. They can even get in on pikes okay. The heavy shield warriors are armored enough that they can walk into pikes and not take too many casualties, so that did work out in my favor-ish, I guess. The Aspis Companion Cavalry and my cavalry ended up being pretty close to even. The thing was that my guys managed to kill his general unit as well in the process, so very much better in my favor in that regard. Okay, so that's our look at these factions. I don't necessarily think that they're going to be as powerful as some of the more powerful factions out there. Like, I definitely don't think that they hold a candle to sort of the Arverni, who I think are still sort of the pinnacle of a good balance of units for a sort of non-Roman, non-Greek faction. I think that they don't necessarily offer too much that's new or interesting other than these Falxmen. And I like the fact that they have got those higher quality axemen as well, but if I recall, I think some other guys might have them now too. Maybe not. So, yeah, the axemen, I think that the higher quality ones really sort of make that concept of some sort of really hard-hitting armor-piercing unit a little bit more viable, but I don't know if it's enough necessarily to push them into the territory where I would really get into them compared to some of the other factions out there. I still think that factions like Egypt are sort of the most powerful, the ones that have a lot of opportunities and a lot of options. I think that their ability to pick sort of any style of army makes it really hard to counterpick them. These factions are all quite easy to counterpick, except the Getay are a little bit harder to counterpick, and the Tylis are a little bit harder to counterpick in that they've got a little bit more variety, but not enough really to make it sort of, like, they're still pretty predictable. Like, these guys, you know they're going to have good sword units. They're probably going to have Falxmen, the Thracian warriors, and they're probably going to have tribal warriors. They might have some Oathsworn, because Oathsworn are always pretty decent. But like they don't have any good options for spears, for instance. They're not really a missile faction, and their cavalry is kind of really a wash. So, I mean, these guys, you can always second guess what they're going to pick pretty accurately, and if they try and pick against type, they're usually in trouble. So that's sort of my opinion of them. I think that they're interesting, and I think they'll add a little bit, but they aren't going to be the top competitive ones. If you really want to get a win, you wouldn't pick one of these guys. But anyway, I hope you found this informative, and as always, I hope to see you all next time.